Okay, to give you a little update where I am at my process. This batch was already mixed, it's already done. Okay, I'm going to try to give you an example where I would be at this point, at this stage. This tote is already mixed with fuel. Let's just say I mixed that 1 week ago and it's sitting here and settling out. This batch was already done and I just pumped it out. Now I'm going to show you how I clean this out with the wet dry vac. Keep some kitty litter and rags on hand just in case any spills, but on the wet dry vac, any old wet dry vac will work. Now on this wet dry vac, I have the cap to seal off the end, the vent. If you don't have the cap on it, what tends to happen if you vacuum a lot, little droplets come out the back side, and you can see how it kind of splattered on the wall the one day. As long as you keep that cap on there, it does not do that. And I usually have a rag underneath it in case any little droplets come out the side vent right here on this wet dry vac. Now my big pump is off to the side. I just have the ends hung up so they're not dripping. And same thing with the wet dry vac. I just have it hanging up out of the way. And like I said in the previous videos, I don't use these centrifuges anymore. I found out just letting it settle under normal gravity is the best way. You don't have to fight with these or anything. So what's left behind from this previous batch, I would say, is about 10 to 15 gallons. You know, it's the leftover sludge. Now I'm going to vacuum that out, and it's still good fuel. I'm just going to refine it better. So what I do is I'll take that and put it into a different tote. See, I have my funnel already ready. Now this is the tote filled with all the sludge left over from previous batches. So after this gets filled right up to the top with all that leftover sludge, I'm going to let it sit for a couple weeks, and I'm going to pump the top half of all that good clean fuel. The bottom half I'm either going to take to a recycling center, or I can use it as good fire starters. So I could burn off this old brush and logs and crap around the property. Before you vacuum out the sludge, make sure you have your vacuum sitting on like an old rag or something like that. Something draped over the vent to make sure it catches any droplets. Okay, I got most of this cleaned out so you can see the sludge at the bottom. The best way to explain what it's like thick grease that's left at the bottom of this. That is the carbon that has settled to the bottom of this tote. That's what makes your oil dirty. It's all that black carbon. Now there will be little pieces of metal and dirt and stuff that has gotten through the bed sheet. That's also mixed with it as well. But any big chunks of carbon the bed sheet will catch. Anything really small will be settled out like this. A good example of what people use carbon for is for like makeup. A lot of inks and stuff like that will have carbon mixed with it to make it black like that for coloring. So like even after washing my hands, it still like stains your hands. So we'll get the rest of this. Of course I have the extension on my wet dry vac so I can get all the way down to the bottom of the tote. Now I'm all done vacuuming it out, so as you can see, it's all done. Now you don't have to get it all. So I'm done vacuuming this tote out. Now I was saying before, you don't have to use the wet dry vac to vacuum out the sludge in these totes. If you had a tank that had a V bottom in it, like I was saying before, you can let it settle in that and open the valve on the bottom and drain out that sludge. And then you have an outlet about 6 inches or more off the bottom, and that could be piped out to your storage tanks. Now that would be the best way to do this, but like I was saying before, I don't want to spend the money to try to get those kind of tanks or find them. So that's why I'm using the totes and the wet dry vac to do all this. I had an idea of putting some boards on the back of these totes to tilt them forward so I can use the valve that's on these totes. That is something I'm going to try later on, so I can try to drain the sludge out without using the wet dry vac. That's something I'm going to experiment with later. So now we're going to take a little break from this for right at the moment and go over to the used motor oil and get that going. Normally I pump the gas into that tote and then pump the oil from that tote into there, but this tote is empty. I got to filter more motor oil. Okay, so this is my raw motor oil I pick up from local garages, and you can see there's a lot of crap in here. You can see it just stuck to the top of this tote. So I have this little pump. It will pump about 5 gallons per hour. on 6 volts from the battery charger. So on the pickup hose, which is the black hose right here, I just have a steel pipe on the end of it to weigh it down. So what I do is I put it down in the oil all the way to the bottom, and you'll feel it when it hits the bottom. So right there, hit the bottom. I can feel all the crap at the bottom, and I'm going to pull this up about 6 inches. And then what I do is I use the battery charger to hold it so it does not go down to the bottom of this tote. But here's a very important thing you want to do so you don't spill any oil. That's a 330 gallon tote, and you can see it has about 30 gallons in there. So I have room for 250 gallons for that tote, and before we'll get close to overfilling. Keeping that pickup about 10 inches off the bottom, I'm only going to get about 220 gallons. I want to make sure all this oil will fit into that tote. Even if you have to put the pickup halfway down or only a quarter way down the tote, make sure this will fit into that tote. Another thing to keep in mind, this tote was sitting outside for about 3 to 4 weeks. Then I brought it inside, being very careful not to disturb it, and it sat in here for a week before starting to pump out. So all the water and dirt and metal and sludge and crap, almost all of that will be at the bottom of that tote settled out. Okay, now the line coming out off of that pump is going to go up to this barrel. If you have a junction, make sure there's hose clamps so it doesn't come apart. Also, vice grip the end of this to the top of the barrel so it does not come out of the barrel. Now to talk about the barrel, how to set it up. This is a standard open lid barrel, but what I did was cut a hole in the bottom of it with a torch, and I tapered it so they come out nice and smooth. So I laid the bed sheet in, and I put a ratchet strap on here nice and tight, and make sure it's up so it's up against this lip like it is on the back side, so this bed sheet doesn't slide down in. Another important thing is to keep this bed sheet off the bottom of the barrel. It's suspended in the barrel. It's about, I would say, 3/4 of the way down, between half to 3/4, just nice and draped inside, and the ratchet strap keeps it from falling down in. If this bed sheet is not suspended, it's going to go up against the sides or against the bottom. It's not going to filter down through this bed sheet good. Now, if it's a brand new bed sheet, you might have to readjust the strap a few times until it's done like stretching or settling. Make sure it doesn't droop down to the bottom. Like I said before, I've been using the same bed sheet for about 5-6 years. I'll show you later how I clean that out. So I have the line coming up into the vice grips. The vice grip is just clamped onto the barrel. It's not pinching the line. It just holds the line in place so it does not slide off. So as you're running motor oil, the more dirty this bed sheet gets, the higher that oil level will get up into the bed sheet. You'll kind of see the line from the previous batch is about halfway up. See, why it's doing that is as the bed sheet clogs up at the bottom, it's getting higher to cleaner spots of the bed sheet so it filters through. So that's why I have it sitting on this mega funnel. In case this bed sheet completely clogged up with carbon, it can overflow from this barrel into this funnel and down into the tote. So my dipper and my drill and everything sits on this as a drip pan basically. Everything goes down and funnels into the tote. So now this barrel could be anywhere on the top of this tote. I used to have this set up right over the hole so it goes right down in, sitting on some 2x4s, but I got this funnel so now I can have this bed sheet anywhere on here. It's hard to see it under there, but it comes out the center of that funnel down into that tote. So now I'm going to put this battery charger on 6 volts at 1.5 amps. Nothing crazy. Since we're just starting off, we could just put that on hold. Just like that. That bed sheet was just cleaned. It's good to go. I can run this whole batch without any issues. So why I have it on 6 volts is I want this pump to go as slow as possible to make sure that barrel will filter all that motor oil and not overflow. Check to make sure you're pumping oil, not water. And try a little bit on your finger to make sure it's actually motor oil, not like thick grease from the bottom. What I used to do is when this tote, let's just say, had more motor oil in it than what that will hold, I used to set the timer on this battery charger and pump about like 10 gallons at a time. But in case that pumped a little bit faster than normal, you don't want to overflow that tote. That's why you want to make sure this will all fit into that first stage motor oil tote. So now, since the battery charger is turned on, now we can walk away and check on it at the end of the week. Usually throughout the week, I'll just check it quick in the morning before I go to work and at the afternoon after work and stuff, and I'll just keep checking in on it to make sure it's all going good. It's more to check to make sure it's not overflowing from the bed sheet, so I don't have to run that motor oil through the bed sheet again. So once this tote is filled with motor oil, I tend to let it sit for about a week. And then when that's done settling out, then I'll mix it in the mixing tote with gasoline and oil. Now, you don't have to let this first stage and second stage motor oil settle for a long period of time. It's mainly after you mix with gasoline and oil, you want to have it sit for at least 2 weeks. For home heating oil for the furnace, you got to let that sit for like 4 weeks each batch to make sure that all settles out good so you're not clogging up nozzles. Settling is the most important thing of this whole process. Now, it might sound like a lot of time to make each batch, but I'm not here watching it. So basically, it's from start to finish, it would take about 4 to 6 weeks to make one full batch. But for me, one batch will last me 6 months. If you have to make more gallons to keep up with machines, your tractor trailers and stuff, you would just have to do more batches or bigger batches. Now, normally I already have this already done before vacuuming out this tote and mixing a batch. I'm just a little bit behind. I kind of was jumping a little bit ahead of myself and just trying to show people how to do this. So to give you the best example, let's just say this was already running all week long, running motor oil into that tote. So on the weekend, what I would do is, first thing is I would take this empty tote out and bring another full tote in of motor oil. Then whatever batch I had done, like this one is done right now, I would pump this out into a nice clean storage tote, and then I would vacuum out the sludge, mix it with gasoline and oil, and then mix it, and then leave and come back next weekend. Okay, let's just say this is the second week. Then again, this would be empty and that would be filled again with motor oil. So then what I would do would be this tote would be ready to pump out, the second mixing tote. Because this has been sitting for a week at that point. This has been sitting for 2 weeks at that point. I would pump this out, put it in a storage tank, vacuum it out, mix it with oil and gasoline, and then again, take this motor tote out, which would be empty, and bring another one in. And even the storage totes, when you're sitting somewhere, you're still doing the same thing. You're not pumping from the very bottom. So even after the motor oil sat for 1 week, the first stage motor oil sat for like that same week and stuff like that, it will even settle up more in these storage totes. Now this tote is going to be retired soon. As it's been outside, the sun biodegrades the plastic. So this plastic is getting very brittle. So this tote is going to be retired once it's empty. Got a brand new one to take its place. I'm just going to clean this out and get this ready. Like I said, all these other totes, the junkyard owns them. I just haven't taken the empty ones back yet. I only have about 6 totes total. Like even totes for motor oil, I usually only have 3 totes of motor oil. What I usually do is every weekend, once I pump a tote of oil out, I'll just run out like in that morning and run out to a local garage, and I'll just refill with motor oil and bring it back. If you have a good steady flow of oil from somewhere, you do not have to store oil around to keep up with it. You could just go and pick up motor oil on the weekends. It only takes me about a half hour to an hour to go pick up a tote of motor oil. So with my big pump, which pumps 15 gallons per minute, it takes me about, 5 minutes to drive out to like a shop, about 15 minutes to fill up the tote, 5 minutes to drive back, and it takes me 5 minutes to pick up the whole tote with my machine and put it in here and run it through this bed sheet. And like I was saying before, if you don't have a machine, what you would do is basically this tote would be empty. You go and pick up motor oil. So you put an empty tote in the back of your truck, you fill it up, you back your truck up as close as you can to the shop. You use that 20-foot hose like I was saying before and pump it out of the truck into that empty tote. So you just have to do transferring around if you do not have a machine or a pallet jack. That's what I used to do before I bought machines. So while this is pumping through that bed sheet, now I'm going to explain a little bit about the dipper. Okay, this dipper is how I check the viscosity. Okay, so when you need to check viscosity, sometimes you might have motor oil which has a lot more transmission fluid, so you need less gasoline in the mix, or less kerosene or something to thin it out. Or the mix could have a lot more gear oil in this tote of oil, or diesel oil from a truck shop, so you might need more gasoline or kerosene or nail polish to thin out the batch. So all we took was like a little piece of flat steel, so I put a little handle on the end of it, and I welded it to the bottom of a paint can. So basically on the paint can, I took the grinder with the cutting wheel, and I cut the bottom of it off, so you can see down inside. And on the other end, I took the little spray nozzle out, so now it has a nice little hole in it. So when you're new to this, first you gotta figure out how long it takes diesel fuel to drain through this dipper. So you dip it in and you pull it out, you count how many seconds it takes for it to drain through the paint can. I already know this paint can takes 1 minute 15 seconds for diesel fuel to drain through. So this batch that I already mixed before, I'll dip it down in and I'll pull it out, and as you can see, it's going to drain through. So you count how many seconds it takes to drain through that paint can. Now this batch is made for the furnace, so it has to be very close to diesel fuel. If diesel fuel takes 1 minute and 15 seconds to drain through this paint can, I want to try to get it between 1 minute 15 seconds to 1 minute and 25 seconds. If it's too thick, the torpedo heater of the furnace is not going to run properly. So this is how you can check viscosity when it has to be precise. But for Stinky Pete and diesel engines, it does not have to be. So usually I just want to get between 1 minute 30 seconds to, I would say, 2 minutes to run in Stinky Pete. So I already have the mixtures figured out, so I don't have to check the viscosity every time. But I wanted to show you, like I said, it's nice to put this stuff up on this mega funnel so it can drip down into this tote. So now I'm going to talk about my mixer, which is just a regular drill with a just a homemade mixing head. It's just a piece of rebar with a little piece of flat steel on the end of it. I welded on, so it just basically barely fits down into the tote. So I stick like the half in there like that, and I can tilt it up and fit the whole thing down in. Now when you mix these batches up, make sure you mix them thoroughly. If you don't mix them good enough, it's not going to be evenly mixed all the way through. So I'll usually run it like clockwise for about like 15 seconds, then I'll run it in reverse about 15 seconds or 30 seconds to make sure this batch is mixed nice and good. So I'll pull it back out, let it drip off a little bit, and I put it back up on the funnel so it can drip down into the tote. So I'll come back to this in like a little bit and I'll show you the mixing process next.